Even critics of the Democratic Party will point out that what still separates the Dems from the Republicans is the Dems' stance on social issues like gay marriage or abortion, things like that. And while that's true-ish, as you noticed from our previous rundown, Dems only really care about you if you're a well-off American white woman. Berta Cáceres was of no concern to Clinton, nor were the thousands of Saudi women living as slaves under an autocratic, patriarchal regime, or the women and children of Haiti, displaced by and or now working at a garment factory that Clinton pushed through in a rush deal as Secretary of State. Or how about the women and children, mostly single mothers, dragged further into destitution and poverty by Democratic policies that slashed welfare programs and bolstered Wall Street? In short, it's not about whether the Dems talk about social issues. It's about what they do. It's about whether or not they actually value your life and well-being above the well-being of their stock portfolios. And while I urge all of you to look into that answer on your own, in the interest of time, I'll go ahead and tell you that, no, they don't give a flying fuck about you. So what's to be done? Well, former Bernie Sanders outreach coordinator Nick Brana has one idea. Last month, he launched the Draft Bernie campaign in an effort to coax Bernie into spearheading the founding of a new People's Party. For more on this, we sat down with Nick to discuss a new party, a unified duopoly, and next steps. Take a look.
So right now what we have in the Democratic Party is there are two parties. There's progressives, and then there's the Democrats, kind of the traditional corporate establishment Democrats. And their ideas are so widely separated that those are two different parties. They should be. And the Democratic Party is much closer to the Republican Party, than those two parties are. I mean, the differences between them have just shrunk over time. From my experience with working with the superdelegates and working with party elites, is that their mentality is nothing close to anything progressive. They have more contempt for progressives than they do Republicans. They see us as like invaders coming into their home. They had a nice thing going,
right.
And we're coming in and kind of screwing the place up.
So what was that like, being part of this progressive campaign and reaching out to the establishment Democrats?
It was actually horrible. I'll be honest. I joined this radical campaign not being entirely certain what I was going to do on it. But knowing that I wanted to put, my skills to use to contribute to this. And I ended up on the one part of the campaign that was actually reaching out back to the establishment. And so it was our job to convince the superdelegates, after Bernie spent each day bashing them as the party establishment, to then support us, and they were uninterested. I mean, they were totally uninterested. They were uninterested in the issues. They didn't care about the issues. I tried to have issue discussions with them, and I just kind of, I started to give up after a while because they were offended, actually, to talk about the issues.
I guess a lot of people have been calling for different parties. Do you think that the U.S. should remain a two-party system? Isn't it a little bit easier to maintain the gears of corruption in just a two-party state, or as Chomsky says, like a one-party state with two different sides to it? Or is the idea that you'll create a third party and then you'll have space for more parties to come up? What is your real vision with that?
Right. So the platform and the party bylaws and the name and the logo and all of this, I don't think it should be determined by me or Bernie or any one person. It should be determined by the people at the founding convention. But what I believe that the party should do, and what I would like to see it do, is what you mentioned. Right now, we are a two-party system thanks to the spoiler effect. And so we need somewhat, in the transition from where we are to where we want to be, we need some kind of plan to beat the establishment within this labyrinth that they've built for us, And we can do that with Bernie if we recruit him to found a new party and bring over the millions of people, just like Lincoln and Van Buren did when he brought over millions of people from the Whig Party to the new Republican Party and replaced it in 4 years. And so that's what I would like to see this party do, essentially. And when we do hopefully replace the Democratic Party, I would like to see this party open up the electoral system in a way that we haven't seen in this country and break down those barriers. And I think that would be the most symbolic show of our principles, essentially, and of keeping ourselves kind of honest. Because you're right. It's a lot, when you look at this country, a lot of what you find is that it's designed in a way to be easily controlled, by corporations, by elites. And so two parties are a lot easier to control than 6 or 12. And so I think what the new party should do, I would hope, and I hope that people agree with me on this, is that when we form our platform, we write into it that we want to completely overhaul the electoral system. It's always been kind of ironic to me about how progressives, when it comes to electoral politics, forget the logic of monopolies. So the Democratic Party, as is, has a monopoly on the left. Without competition, there's nowhere else for people on the left to go. And that's why that's the essence of the spoiler effect. It's kind of this hostage relationship that they have with us. But we've reached the point where so many people have left the Democratic Party, especially since the election. 14 million people have left since the election. That's 20% of what the Democratic Party was in early November. That really independents are the party now. Yeah. There's about 44% of the country is independents. 57% of the country says they want a new party, a new major party. And so, we're kind of pulling our hair here as progressives saying, how are we ever going to take back the minority? Instead, let's go create a party that actually represents working people. It represents the views that Bernie espoused, which happen to be the views that most Americans support on the issues, and create a party that actually represents people.
Curious, because there are other parties that exist, whether that's the Green Party, the Socialist Alternative. Why not build with them as opposed to starting a new party?
Because any third party, it has to have two things to succeed, in my mind. First, it has to have critical mass of support. None of those parties do. And we just went through an election with the two most despised candidates in U.S. history, practically. And yet still, neither the Green Party, the Libertarian Party, none of the smaller third parties could crack 5% to get minor party designation.
Made it to 7, but I don't think the Greens did.
The Greens certainly did not. Yeah, I think the Greens were either 1 or 2%. And so that's why the spoiler effect is so crushing. It's so crippling to parties that are trying to rise in a way where they're trying to build essentially from nothing up. And that's why in our own history, that has never worked. What has worked is when somebody from the old regime brings over millions of people, when a party has stopped representing its base. And that's exactly what we have now. That's what the Whig Party was back in the 1850s, in that it was still a pro-slavery party, but its base was abolitionist. And so the Republican Party, came about and gave them a home that actually represented their views, and we could do the same thing here. And so that's why I think it would be easier to start a new party than to try to build one of the existing parties. That's right.
So part of the caveat, if you will, is that you're not just calling for a third party or a new party. You're calling for an engaged populace, which is sort of, that's like the bane of any activist's existence is how the hell do I get people to pay attention? Do you see the creation of this party as an impetus for citizen engagement? So is it basically kind of like doing two things at once? You're creating an alternative party, but you're also pushing people to become engaged?
Absolutely. The traditional model for a political party in our system is they want you to pull a lever every 4 years or 2 years, and they want you to go away. They don't want you to vote on party officers, DNC chair. No, don't be involved in that. Don't be involved in what we're doing otherwise. What I have in mind is something entirely different. This is kind of like a movement party. It's a movement first that has an electoral wing, that the Democrats really plan on facilitating the move to the right, just like they've been doing for the past several decades. And so the concept that I have for a new party, the concept that Draft Bernie has, is that we're going to create a party that actually is the movement itself. We're just going to give it an electoral wing to go with it. And so we're going to mobilize to do all of the things, like oppose the pipelines that are being built, like in North Dakota, no DAPL, and all of the things that Trump is doing as well. So we're going to be the resistance to that, and a real resistance, not a fake resistance that's approving his cabinet nominees. So it'll be just an entirely different conception of a party, a much more democratic and engaged conception, I think.
For more on Nick's campaign to draft Bernie, visit draftbernie.org.